everyone, welcome back to another video. So my apologies for missing missing last week's video rather, but I was working on an exhaust project on that GS300 on the lift there that took up all of my time, and I didn't want to just rush and put out a crap video for you guys. So I opted to, rather than just try to ram jam something together, take a little bit of time, miss a week, and actually put something that is quality out to you. So, as you guys saw in the intro montage, I was working on the Mark II, and I made this little patch panel right here that covers up some rust that I cut out, and with a little bit more prep and some sanding and everything else, I can make that a permanent fixture of the car and have it look at least as pretty, hopefully, as the rest of the engine bay. So I think in this episode we're going to try to clear coat the engine bay. I've never sprayed clear like this before, so we'll see if I screw it up or not, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So beyond that, what we're going to start the episode with is all of this aluminum right here. And what this is an oil pan for my buddy Logan over at Defined Auto Works. So you can see I have the pieces cut out, and I'll do some additional trimming to kind of set up nice outside corner joints like this one right here, as opposed to just flat sides like what we have on some of them, as that makes it a lot easier to weld these joints. So I guess the first thing to do is I can probably get this panel and this one tacked, and probably these two outside ones, and then get everything trimmed and tailored to fit, and then start buzzing everything together. Logan's oil pan is all tacked together now, all ready to weld, and you can see my contraption to attempt to keep this pan flat. So I have some old fixture plates that are clamped down holding the pan to the transmission cart that I have, and this transmission cart is extremely handy for removing and installing the transmission in the Supra. So let's see just how handy it is to keep a four-rotor oil pan flat. So at this point, I can come in and do all of the welding on it, and it might get a little bit interesting in some spots, because I don't want to unclamp this and running these vertical, or these outside corner joints that are going vertical. Those might be a little bit interesting, but it's just what I have to do to get this thing together for him. After a little bit of a hot aluminum welding session, Logan's oil pan is now all together. So the sumps are constructed, they're welded everywhere around. I have not welded the inside of it. I'm not sure if he wants me to do that, but I will check with him. And most importantly, the cart of doom managed to keep the pan pretty well flat. So I put a straight edge on the bottom of it, and minus a few little ripples that will go away as he tightens the pan down, everything is good to go, and I have no doubt this thing will seal up. So at this point, I'm going to get out of here for today, and then tomorrow, now that I have space back here, I can go ahead, come in, and finish up, or I guess get ready to finish up this lower core support. So it's now time to work on the lower core support on the Mark II. So I did all of the sanding and cleanup that I'm going to do, aside from kind of buzzing down any high spots on the patch panel. So I'll do that first, and then I can come in with some good old-fashioned POR 15. I can coat that lower core support, and then it'll be time for primer and seam sealer and paint and all of that. So I guess let me get the whiz wheel over here. I can get the patch panel cleaned up, get it ready for some POR to go down on top of it, and then apply it, and then the drying game, or the waiting game for it to dry, begins. first coat of POR 15 has been applied, and here's what we're looking like. So it covered up all the areas that had some rust, and this is kind of, for you guys, I guess if you guys haven't used POR 15 before, it's kind of a rust prevention, rust encapsulation coating. So you supposedly can paint directly to rust, which I did a little bit on this lower core support, and some of you guys may have had good luck with it, some of you may have not. I know that when my dad and I were initially building this car, we used POR fairly extensively on like some of the undercarriage stuff and things along those lines, and had really good luck with it. So working with the materials that I know and things that I know worked in the past, that's why I'm using it now on this lower core support. So I have to wait for that coat to dry for a bit, then I think I'll come in and do a second coat of it, and then at that point in time I'll be ready to do some light surface sanding, some priming, and so on and so forth. So thankfully I'm not doing the entire engine bay again. That was enough fun for one event with all of that, but if I want this engine bay to last, I need to do my due diligence and do the lower core support, get it knocked out, and then this whole thing should stand the test of time. The POR 15 has had quite a few hours to dry at this point in time, and here is what we are left with. So it is nice and dry, and it's ready for me to scuff it and then put some primer down in preparation to do some seam sealing work. So I'm pretty happy with how this all came out. Both the top and the bottom side are nice and good to go. And now I'm not worried about rust poking its ugly head back through the lower core support. The second coat of primer has now been applied. And once this dries, then I can come in with the seam sealer, seal up all of the seams, and once the seam sealer dries, it'll be time for color. So thankfully, this is not as in-depth of a process as doing the entire engine bay was, but it should still look nice, and it'll match the rest of the engine bay, and I'll have that rust hole patched, which is the largest portion, the largest component of it. Seam sealer has now been applied, and here is what we're looking at. So I pulled all the tape off while the seam sealer was still wet, so that way it's a little bit easier to get off and none of it gets stuck underneath of the seam sealer. And I sealed the seam along here, up a little bit across the top there. I didn't bother with this side since there's this fastener head in the way, but I think it should be all right. And yeah, you can see everywhere that the seam sealer went down, and now I feel pretty good about the integrity of this lower core support moving forward. So I have to let all the seam sealer dry before I can put any paint on top of it, which will probably take the remainder of the day. So tomorrow I can come in, gear up, put some color down, and at that point in time, once the color is down, once everything is dry, then this thing will be ready for clear coat and the engine bay will officially be completed. Today is color day for the lower core support on the Mark II. So yesterday, as you guys saw, we came in, primed and seam sealed and did all of that. And today I can actually put color down on this and the lower core support will be done. And then we can move on to actually putting this thing back together, I guess after clear coat goes down. So there isn't really anything too exciting or too much to say about this. I just need to come in and wipe off some of the dust and grime and debris that has accumulated on this thing, as I did get a little bit of primer overspray on this frame rail. So I'm going to spritz back over top of it, and I don't want there to be dust underneath of the paint. One quick little tech tip or bit of tool advice that I have for you guys are these right here. This is essentially a spray gun adapter for cans of spray paint. So for me, my hands don't do well with using cans of spray paint and pressing down on the nozzle for an extended duration of time. Granted, this won't be an extended duration of time, just spraying this lower core support. But even still, I like using these adapter guns much more than just the nozzle on the top of the can. And the nice thing here is you can use individual fingers, you can use your whole hand, so that way you aren't wearing out just one particular digit or one particular tendon on your hands. You can work your way through and use your entire hand to avoid having your hand cramp up or anything painful happen. So this thing is wiped down now and it's ready for paint. So I can get my spray gun adapter, put on my can of spray paint, I can put my mask on, and I can go ahead and get some color on the lower core support. While we're waiting for the paint on the Mark II's lower core support to dry enough to put a second coat on, we can take this interim period and do a little bit of work on the Mark IV. So if you see on the ground back here, that looks a lot like a carbon fender with a big hole in it. And if we take another little stroll over here, this looks a lot like a titanium fender exit. So what I am going to do is take the front end of the car apart, fit the carbon fender back on this, and put the fender exit exhaust on. So the reason that I am doing that is I'm going to build the race exhaust setup Mark II for the Mark IV. So when this thing was on the dyno with the little race turn down, we shot a big fireball out underneath of it, which looks cool, but in all reality and practicality, the fact that I have my fuel lines running underneath of the car here makes this area a little bit more sensitive in terms of having a big fireball or having something hot blowing out underneath of it. So I don't want to cause a fuel fire, I don't want to rupture or compromise those fuel lines. So the best option that I can think of is to put the fender exit back on it and make sure that I don't barbecue the underside of the car. So this should be pretty straightforward. It's just swapping the fender over, and I'll have to pull the bumper off to get the Inconel downpipe off, and all will be well then. So the only thing that I will need to do that I don't have right now will be to build new wastegate dump tubes. So I have the old titanium wastegate dump tubes over here that they look awesome. I did this dimple dyed gusset in between them and all of that, and they look sweet, and they're miter cut. They were as close to perfect as I could make a pair of dump tubes, but they don't fit with the alternator on the Mark IV, and that is a big issue, as this thing does need its charging system. So rather than having those that dump out towards the ground, I'll have to build new dump tubes that will come out somewhere near where that fender exit does, but in order to determine where that needs to come out, I first need to put the fender exit on and figure all of that out. So without me droning on anymore, let's go ahead, lower this thing down, start disassembling it, and then we can get to work on the fender exit. And the Supra is now in race mode. So I'll need to do a little bit of trimming on the carbon down in this area right here, as this was all just kind of roughly fit initially, and it needs to be final tailored, and I need to build a trim ring and so on and so forth for it. But the first thing I'll need to do is figure out some sort of an auxiliary brace / mount that will tie this tube into some bit of the chassis, so that way there'll be a lot of exhaust gas and a lot of force that will be exiting the fender exit now. I can't call it a downpipe, and that would be likely to try to rotate it, and I don't want that to happen. So I'll probably brace it somewhere off of the upper frame rail right here, but I'll need to get probably a turnbuckle to do that, or get a turnbuckle together to do that, and I don't have the materials here for it right now. But I also need to find where I'm going to put the O2 bung, which that I can do today, and we'll knock that out here in a few minutes. Beyond that, the Mark II now has its second coat of Steelite on the lower core support, so it is still drying, and it will take some time for it to actually cure before I can put clear coat and actually finish the engine bay. So this is on hold right now until it dries, but we can get back to work on this fender exit here in a little bit. So under the hood, it looks kind of naked without having the downpipe snake through, but this is for a good reason. And even though we now have a mismatched body panel, at least we'll have some flames and cool stuff shooting out of here. So I also need to figure out how or I guess if I'm able to, but how I can snake the wastegate dump tubes from the wastegate outlets up through the fender as well. That may be a little bit of a challenge, but I may have enough room to kind of bring them along. And I know you guys can't see right now because it's dark, but along here, or maybe somewhere in through here, I'll figure something out, and I may dump the wastegate dump tubes out the back here. We'll see when I get the materials in and when I can test tire clearance and all of that, because that is going to be the key, and that's going to be the biggest hurdle to get over with this. And I guess I could always dump the tubes at the ground, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I think it would be kind of cool to take them out with the fender exit, but if I can't do that, then at the ground they will go. Well, the fender exit exhaust is now ready to be welded. So here's what we have going on. And you can hear the back purge gas coming out of this, filling it up with argon so that way I can get good, true, correct titanium welds. But we have this tab right here that comes off of the side of the tube with a little reinforcement pad, and then two triangular gussets with speed holes just to class the joint up a little bit. And this whole bracket setup will prevent the downpipe from rotating as exhaust and or anti-lag flames and pressure waves and what have you are making their way through it. So once that thing purges out for a little bit, then I'll feel comfortable coming in, welding all of that together, and then the fender exit can go back on the car, or actually I might leave it off for the time being, as I still need to put the O2 bung in, which is what this little blue circle there refers to. fender exits support bracket is all welded, and this thing is completed minus the O2 bung. So I have an O2 bung here, but I also ordered one of the heatsink O2 bungs that I've been using, and I really like the way they look much more than just a standard O2 bung. And for something like this, I will be vain. I'd rather have it look cool and be exactly what I want than just throw an O2 bung in and not be completely satisfied with it. But all of that being said, you can see on the inside the back purge worked well, and I'll actually come in and do some sanding on here to try to blend this in a little bit, since that is a very visible portion of this. And on the back side here, this is what we ended up with for the bracket. So off camera, I went ahead and I test fit it. It still fits up perfectly fine. And once I get the O2 bung in, this will be ready to go on and be ready to go into service. So we have our tab, we have our 2 triangular gussets on it with beauty holes or speed holes, whichever way you want to say it. It's welded the whole way around, and this is very strong, and I don't have any fear that the fender exit is going to move around on me. If it does, it's either bending the exhaust itself or it's bending a portion of the car's sheet metal, and in either of those instances we have bigger problems to deal with. But with all of that being said, and now that we have jump-started this whole process here and this whole process here, I think that's going to be about the end of this episode. So, thank you guys, as always, for tuning in, for watching me now get back onto the Mark II project, for coming along on the Mark IV project with me, and we have big, exciting things to happen with both of those cars in the very near future. And I cannot wait for it. I hope you guys are excited as well, and these upcoming videos I'm very, very excited about. So, without rambling on forever, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. So, as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.